the sound of shattering glass. It's not just a sound, it's a symphony. And no, this isn't ordinary glass. This is their ego, that invisible, inflated thing they thought was indestructible. Funny, isn't it? How they carried it like armor, unaware it was made of glass all along. They built their castles on clouds, their confidence wrapped in delusions, thinking nothing could touch them. And then you showed up. A whisper of truth, a nudge of reality, and boom, down it all came, crumbling like sandcastles against the tide. You didn't even need to break a sweat. No screaming, no tantrums, no drawn-out wars of words. Just a mirror, cold, unflinching, merciless. You didn't attack them, you simply reflected their truths. But that's the thing about people like them. They fear the mirror more than the sword. The sword they can deflect. The sword they can blame. But a mirror? It shows them the one thing they're terrified of facing, themselves. And that's where the cracks begin. Egos are funny little monsters, aren't they? They're like balloons, full of air, floating high above reality. But all it takes is a single pinprick, a single undeniable truth, and pop, they're gone. The air escapes, the illusion shatters, and what's left behind? A mess, a quiet, haunting silence that speaks louder than any scream. And you were the one holding the pin. You didn't need to shout or argue. Your existence alone was enough. The truth doesn't need volume. It speaks in silence. But oh, the chaos that follows. When their ego breaks, they scramble. They lash out, not because you hurt them, but because they see the cracks. They try to glue it back together, patch it up, convince themselves it's still whole. But deep down, they know. They know the truth. They know that the fragile glass they clung to was never meant to last. And you're not the villain in their story, though they'll paint you as one. No, you're the wake-up call, the thunderstorm that clears the air. It's almost laughable, isn't it? How they thought their ego made them strong. How they wore it like a badge, a crown, a shield. But the truth is, their ego wasn't strength. It was weakness masquerading as power, a house of cards pretending to be a fortress. And when you knocked on the door, the whole thing came tumbling down. You didn't destroy them, you revealed them. You pulled back the curtain and showed them the strings. And oh, how they hated you for it. But hate is just fear in disguise. Fear of being seen, fear of being known, fear of being wrong. And when you shattered their ego, you didn't just expose their fears, you forced them to face them. That's the thing about the truth. It's relentless. It doesn't care about feelings or pride. It's raw, unfiltered, unapologetic. And when it hits, it doesn't just bruise, it breaks. It tears down everything they thought they knew about themselves. And in that moment, when the dust settles, they have a choice: rebuild or remain broken. Oh, but they'll never admit it, will they? No, they'll never thank you for being the one who held the mirror. They'll never acknowledge the gift you gave them. Because to thank you would mean admitting they needed it. Admitting they were wrong. And people like them, they'd rather drown in their pride than admit they were wrong. But that's okay. You didn't do it for their gratitude. You didn't do it for their validation. You did it because it needed to be done. You see, people like them build their identity on a foundation of lies. Lies they tell themselves. Lies they tell the world. I'm strong. I'm invincible. I'm better. But when you strip away the lies, when you pull back the veil, what's left? A hollow shell. A fragile, trembling thing that doesn't know how to exist without its mask. And that's where the real work begins. They won't admit it now, but someday, In the quiet moments when no one's watching, they'll remember. They'll remember the shatter, the silence, the truth. They'll remember you. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize that you didn't break them. You freed them from the weight of their own illusion, freed them to see the world and themselves as they truly are. But that's the irony, isn't it? The thing that sets them free feels like a prison at first. The silence that follows a shattered ego is unlike anything else. It's not just quiet, it's definite. It's a void, a black hole where their confidence used to be. And in that silence, there's a choice. They can wallow in it, let it consume them, or they can rise from it, reborn. But rising isn't easy. Rising requires them to confront the parts of themselves they've spent their whole lives avoiding. And that's why they hate you, because you made them see. But hate doesn't bother you, does it? No, you know the truth. You know that the strongest steel is forged in fire. That growth doesn't come from comfort, it comes from pain. And their pain, it's the first step, the first crack in the shell, the first spark in the fire. And while they may curse you now, deep down, they know. They know that this moment, this shattering, is the best thing that's ever happened to them. Because for the first time, they're not living a lie. Egos don't die quietly. They go out kicking and screaming. But when the screaming stops, when the dust settles, what's left? The truth. The raw, unvarnished truth. And that truth is their only hope, their only chance to rebuild, to grow, to become something real. And you're not the villain. You're not the hero. You're the catalyst, the spark that lit the fire, the force that changed everything. But change is messy, isn't it? It's not clean, it's not pretty, it's not gentle. It's chaos. Beautiful, destructive, necessary chaos. And in that chaos, they'll find themselves. Not the version they pretend to be, but the version they were always meant to be. And when they do, they'll remember you. They'll remember the moment their ego shattered, the moment the silence spoke louder than words, the moment they began to wake up. But here's where the story twists. See, shattering their ego wasn't the ending. It was the beginning. You didn't just break their illusion. You left them with a choice. That's the cruel beauty of truth, isn't it? It doesn't give answers. It gives questions. And now they stand at the crossroads of who they were and who they could be. A moment of reckoning. A battlefield in their mind. The smoke clears, the debris settles, and they're left staring into the abyss of their own reflection. But what do they see? A ghost of their pride, a shadow of their former self, or maybe, just maybe, a flicker of something they've never dared to acknowledge. Potential. Not the kind born of arrogance or inflated self-worth, but potential that is raw, unpolished, and painfully real. The kind of potential that demands they confront their deepest fears and insecurities. But reaching for that potential? Oh, it demands a price. It demands they bury the old self, burn it to ashes, and rise from the pyre like something reborn. The question is, will they? It's easier to crawl back into the comfort of denial, isn't it? To piece together the shattered remnants of their ego and pretend the cracks don't exist. That's what most people do. They tape the glass, hide the scars, and wear the mask a little tighter. But there's a problem with that, isn't there? Once you've tasted the truth, you can't untaste it. It lingers like smoke, filling the air, seeping into their thoughts. They may try to run, but the truth is faster. It follows them, haunts them, grows louder with every step. And that's where the real torment begins. Because they can't hate you forever. Hatred is too heavy, too exhausting to carry. Over time, it crumbles under the weight of its own futility. And in the void where hatred used to live, something new begins to grow. Understanding. Not gratitude. Oh no, they're not ready for that yet. But understanding. A quiet, reluctant acceptance that maybe, just maybe, you weren't their enemy after all. Maybe you were the wake-up call they desperately needed but never wanted. But you didn't do it for them, did you? You didn't shatter their ego out of malice or a need for revenge. You did it because the truth deserved to breathe. Because lies, no matter how ornate or convincing, are cages. And you saw them trapped, suffocating under the weight of their own illusion. You weren't cruel. You were honest. Brutally, unapologetically honest. And honesty, my friend, is the sharpest blade of all. It doesn't just cut, it carves. It removes the rot, the decay, the falsehoods they've clung to for far too long. But that process, it's not gentle. It's not kind. It's chaos. It's destruction. It's standing in the middle of the storm and daring it to tear you apart. That's what you gave them, the storm. And storms don't apologize. Oh, but they'll remember you. Years from now, when the wounds have healed and the scars have become stories, they'll look back. And in that moment of reflection, they'll realize something chilling. You weren't their villain. You were their reckoning. The catalyst that forced them to grow, to evolve, to rise above the shallow, hollow version of themselves they once thought was untouchable. That's the irony, isn't it? That the pain you inflicted wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of their awakening. But they don't see that yet. Not fully. They're still picking up the pieces, still staring at the wreckage, still wondering what comes next. And you? You're already gone, leaving nothing behind but the silence, that deafening, haunting, transformative silence. Because in the end, it's not your words they'll remember. It's your absence, your silence. The way you came shattered everything they knew and left without a trace. It's the silence that will echo in their mind, that will push them to grow, that will remind them of the moment everything changed. But you knew this, didn't you? You've seen it before. The cycle, the breakdown, the rebuild, the transformation. You knew that breaking their ego would break them, but you also knew they'd survive it, thrive because of it. You weren't their enemy. You were their catalyst. The storm they never saw coming, the force they couldn't stop, the truth they couldn't escape. And that's why they'll never forget you. The world is full of people who live their lives behind masks, too afraid to confront the truth of who they are. But not them. Not anymore. You stripped them of that mask, held up the mirror, and forced them to look. To really look at their flaws, at their fears, at their untapped potential. And in doing so, you gave them the one thing they could never have given themselves, a chance to change. Oh, they'll hate you for it at first. That's inevitable. They'll curse your name, replay every word, every action, every moment that led to the shattering. But over time, as the dust settles and the pain fades, they'll see it for what it truly was: liberation. Liberation from the lies, from the ego, from the chains they didn't even realize were binding them. And as they rise from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more authentic than ever before, there will be one undeniable truth etched into their soul. They will never, ever forget the storm you brought. But here's the thing about storms. They don't linger. They tear through, wreak havoc, and move on. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't stay to watch the aftermath. You didn't wait for their gratitude or their understanding. You left. knowing your silence would speak louder than any words ever could. And speak it will. In the quiet moments, in the spaces between their thoughts, in the choices they make moving forward, your silence will echo, a constant reminder of the moment their world was shattered, and the moment their true self was born. Because in the end, it's not about you. It was never about you. It's about them, their growth, their transformation, their journey. And while you may never cross paths again, while they may never get the chance to thank you or confront you, they will always carry a piece of you with them. You didn't just shatter their ego, you shattered their illusions, their lies, their chains. And in doing so, you set them free. And that freedom? Oh, that's the best wake-up call they'll never forget.